Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in the clown decade, a day where women tell us exactly how lonely men think. Because obviously the only people that can tell us how lonely men think is women who are well adjusted into their social circles. Those social circles being that of the media class. And with that we may as well get straight into it. First article by someone called Laura Bates. I went undercover in the incel community to try and understand men like Jake Davison. If we're going to tackle the incel ideology and its violent hatred of women, we must describe it as the unacceptable extremism it is. So a couple of points to go through for context, obviously. So for those who don't know, Jake Davison is the man who went around Plymouth and killed 5 people, including 2 very young children. The man is unequivocally a terrible person, and no one should look up to him in any way. But while people were speculating a motive for the attack, which just from the face of it seemed like a domestic that got out of hand, it was reported that he was an incel, which people mainly found out through his now closed down YouTube channel, which was called Professor Waffle. On it he had literally 3 videos, I think, talking about, well, women, because he's an incel and he can't basically get a proper relationship with a girl. And I think in one of the clips, I don't want to play it because I might get banned from YouTube for putting it up, but he is basically saying that women are idiots and only follow men with money. Now, that's not something I necessarily agree with. I think women tend to go for men with higher status, and that doesn't necessarily mean higher salary, though it can do sometimes. So from this, everyone is now saying that it was an incel attack, and now the media went mad trying to explain exactly what an incel was, and that's why we're going through this article by Laura Bates. And Laura Bates wrote a book called Men That Hate Women, and when interviewed with The Guardian about it, their title for it was Laura Bates on Men Who Hate Women. They canonise and revere and idolise murderers. So just from that you can see about where her head is at when it comes to these types of people. And I imagine her book isn't that much better when it comes to describing them. I don't think she's going to be very fair about them, because she is a feminist activist. So with that, we may as well get into the article. I hope the women of Plymouth collectively take some responsibility for this. This was the shocking response of one man online after the tragic events on Thursday evening when Jake Davison, 22, massacred 5 victims in the city before taking his own life. Who was it by? We don't know. What forum was it on? We have no idea. It definitely wasn't Facebook. So thanks, I have no idea what to think of this. This could be anyone online and it could be a troll. To understand this callous response, you need to know about so-called incel ideology. Incels are a sprawling online community of men who describe themselves as involuntarily celibate, which I think's a bit of a misnomer. They seem to actually want a genuine, heartwarming relationship rather than just sex. I think if you had state-mandated prostitutes paid for by the state and given to all these men, I don't think it would fix their problems. But she goes on. They blame women for their lack of a relationship success and share a starkly misogynistic worldview that portrays women as dehumanized sex objects whose sole purpose is to give men satisfaction. I need citations there. It's kind of a half-truth, but this is the only thing a feminist can see from what they are saying. Because from what I can tell, it's not that they hate women, it is more that they hate society, and even hate's probably a bit of a strong word. Because quite a lot of them are just MGTOW. They can see that society does incentivise women to either be single or be very promiscuous at the very least, what with abortions being incredibly common, contraceptive being incredibly common, and commitment of women, especially under 30, not being at the forefront of their mind. Obviously that's a gross generalisation, and you do get women in their 20s who do want to find love, do want to start a family, do want to find a man they can spend the rest of their life with. But even then, when they do that, these incels will make the claim that family courts and divorce courts and things like that really do tend to favour women, so even a man getting in a relationship is basically a risk not worth taking. And so obviously they're very resentful for all this. I think resentful is a more accurate term than hate. But she goes on. In online postings and videos, Davison, who appeared obsessed with being a virgin, repeatedly described his affinity with incel ideology. I'm socially isolated, I have no social circle, and I don't know any girls, he said in one video. Yeah, it's bad. I feel bad for the guy. I imagine it's hard to be a man wanting to find girls and having no girls to interact with whatsoever. In another deeply misogynistic post, apparently it's misogynistic of him to say he's socially isolated. That's what's been implied there. He said sexual assault was justified because women don't need men no more. He uploaded hate-filled rants about single mothers and liked videos about looking for a whore and why women always lie. Okay. So I, for a start, don't trust her framing that he justified sexual assault. I don't buy that. I don't know what he said, and she didn't give the full quote because I think she's lying about it. And he also uploaded a hate-filled rant about single mothers. Well, single mothers are a problem. You look at the stats, single mothers, by and large, well, I shouldn't say single mothers, I should say fatherless children generally turn into criminals. Or if not that, they certainly have a disadvantage in life. A father is needed in a family, or at least a more masculine role model is needed in a two-parent household. Though I think a mother-father relationship is probably more ideal. And now I'm going to end up on The Guardian as a hate-filled ranter who is homophobic. And yeah, the guy likes some videos. I have no idea what these videos are about. They could be joke videos, they could be super serious. I have no idea. There is no citation for what these videos actually are, so I'm just going to ignore that and carry on. Davison wrote that incel virgins were people similar to me who had nothing but themselves. He described himself as a perpetual victim, me against the world, with life rigged against him. Yeah, he doesn't have friends, from what I can tell. He is a loner. He goes online to rant at a YouTube channel that's fairly small, that not many people watch, until after he did the shooting, and after he killed himself, and after YouTube deleted it. And he may be wrong about being lonely and all that, but unfortunately, all that really matters is how he feels. He feels lonely. He feels like he has nothing but himself, despite the fact he lives with a family. It is a man calling out for help, really. That's why he has such a warped view of the world, because he needs help. And all these feminists can do is just say, yeah, all he is filled with hate, and they don't think why. That never seems to cross their mind. He said he had been consuming the black pill overdose, referring to a fatalistic sector of the incel community who describe themselves as black-pilled and believe there is no hope of life getting any better for them because their genetics rule out any women ever being attracted to them. And this article implies that you also are not attracted to these men. But yeah, this is how stupid it is. For some reason, she thinks that the slang black-pilled is just a thing for the incel community. No, black-pilled is all over the internet. All right, even leftists use it. It's just internet jargon, basically. It's not a niche. It's not specific to any particular community. Every community uses it. And while I see the right wing using it more than the left wing generally, I have definitely seen the left wing use it. And I think the reason for that is because I spend more of my time looking at right wing circles. So I don't want to outright say that because I don't have data on it. But anecdotally, I've seen everyone use it. So to say it's an incel like slang term, that's just stupid. And only someone who doesn't understand the internet could say that. So when she says she's been in the incel community for like 2 years or whatever, studying these type of men, somehow she still doesn't get that. So now we get into the really political stuff. Most incels start by, as they call it, taking the red pill, a metaphor borrowed from the Matrix science fiction films, in which swallowing a coloured capsule allows the protagonist to see the world as it really is. They claim to have discovered that the whole world is a feminist gynocracy, ruled by women, where men are helpless victims. Some believe it is possible to improve their relationship prospects through strategies like gym-axing, working out, but those describing themselves as black-pilled have a nihilistic worldview and tend to see violence against women as a better solution than self-improvement. Okay, so from my experience with incels, I don't know any that support violence against women. From what I hear from this article, this sounds a lot like the MGTOW movement. And for those of you that haven't seen the documentary The Red Pill, go watch it. It really is a red pilling on all this. But they are basically just men who are activists who try and make, the laws I mentioned before a bit fairer, but they also just don't want to participate in relationships with women. And they have friendships with women, they're fine with that, but they just see or have experienced monogamous relationships that are just a road to a terrible endpoint. Which, in the documentary The Red Pill, yeah, you can really understand that from some of the stories told. But as I say, I don't think Davison ever... I don't believe he justified sexual assault against women, and I certainly don't think in any of his videos he advocated attacking women, and certainly didn't advocate for killing them. But as I say, that wasn't even a terrorist attack, and the autist that we had in, I think it was Canada, who drove a truck through people and turned out to be an incel. Again, I don't think that was a terrorist attack, and I don't think he just targeted women. So as I say, most things said in this article can just be debunked by looking at the real world. It's like she cherry picks the worst things said, not realising that some of them might be trolls, not serious, or jokes, and just running with it and writing a whole book about it. So she goes on. Online incel forums are steeped in extreme misogyny, with members regularly suggesting women should be raped and murdered. They encourage each other to rise up in a day of retribution or incel rebellion, when they will punish society, and women in particular, for their suffering by murders as many normies, non-incels, as possible. I love how in this... Oh, I love how they think normie means non-incel. Oh, that is amazing. See, sure, these forums could be like unironically trying to network to start this. I don't buy that at all. I see a lot of talk of revolution online. How many people are actually serious about that? The answer is basically none of them. You see leftists do it all the time. You know, workers of the world are going to unite and rise up, and, you know, the most they do is go to a protest or maybe make the chaz. That's it, though. They don't go further than that. So, like, yeah. Sure, they want revenge on the world. Yeah, well, loads of communists want to kill capitalists as well. They don't actually do it. What's your point? It started when I realised some of the boys I work with on gender inequality and sexual consent in the UK schools were parroting extremist belief and fake statistics. Didn't you know 87% of women lie about rape? One of them said. Well, yeah, I don't think that's true. Women do lie about rape, though. I soon realised that these teenagers had been radicalised online, but it wasn't a kind of radicalisation anyone was talking about. Would you say it's radicalisation to have a, bad statistic? I don't know what you mean. So I posed online as Alex, a disillusioned young white man who was tired of being called privileged when he felt deeply unsatisfied with life. I had to pass tests to be allowed to access to certain forums, explaining in detail what kind of incel I was. So I began the painstaking process of learning incel terminology and the bizarre pseudo-scientific theories incels use to justify their worldview. My god, this will be good. Women, referred to as foids, a derogatory abbreviation of female humanoid, used to emphasise that they are not seen as fully human. I don't know if that's true. I watched men earnestly debate whether women should be murdered or kept as sex slaves, and argued over whether rape should be legalised. It shouldn't, one said, because that would take all the fun out of it. That's obviously a joke. Come on. The men I met in these forums were almost exclusively white, usually well-educated, and a lot of them, though not all, were young. Racism and sexism overlap in their ideology, with particular vitriol reserved for women who sleep with non-white men. The movement is transnational, but many of those I encountered referred to the UK specifically. One day they were discussing a massacre at a US school. There were rumours that the shooter had been rejected by a female classmate. A forum member hoped that he had been able to rape her before she died. I switched off my computer and cried. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if even half the things she's saying are to be taken earnestly, which, you know, might be fair at this point, yeah, I agree, that's pretty bad. But I don't know why you got into this place and didn't expect to see things like that. Views like this are so extreme that incels are often written off as a small group of losers who should be pitied, not seen as a threat. But in the past 10 years, men who have been immersed in incel ideology have repeatedly committed real-life atrocities. And then she goes into examples such as Elliot Rodgers and other people like that. Like, yeah, I agree, there have been incels that have committed murder. And I think it is possible that some of them were radicalised in circles like this. And as I say, just from her examples, it's not like she lacks them. And while some of them may be jokes, some of them also may be serious. Maybe some of them really do want to go out and rape and murder women. Although I do find it weird that most people who commit these murders are A, lone wolves, and B, don't actually attempt to rape when they are murdering these people. And I think the reason for that is more that they blame society as a whole and women as well, so they tend to go for random women in society. But as I said, they don't rape them at all. They just murder, if they do go out to murder or injure or whatever. So this really isn't anything to do with sex, so incel really is a misnomer, even if it is a self-portraying one. But back on topic, yes, these murderers absolutely should be stopped, and they are unequivocally some of the worst people in the world. I am never going to take someone seriously if they blame all of their problems on society, or a specific group, and in this case it's women. Now the incels that are doing their best to self-improve and try and get out there and actually try and get a girl, yeah, you're doing the right thing. It worked for me. And I think if there are incel communities like the one she is describing that are actually unironic and serious 100%, yeah, don't join those. Try, if you are an incel, do try and get yourself out of those communities. They're not helpful. They're just going to put you down a dark path. That isn't going to help yourself or anyone. And no girl's going to want a man like that. But after going through about 10 paragraphs going on about these mass shooters who are incels and how incels that she has seen replying to it are praising them and revering them as heroes, whatever, it really annoys me that she then writes this. Of course, some men drawn into incel groups are vulnerable, have real problems, or haven't found healthy spaces to explore issues like sex and relationships elsewhere. It's no coincidence that the incel community has swelled as government cuts have led to a significant reduction in youth-focused services. It's always the government's fault. It's never kind of societies. It's never what she wants from feminism. It's like you blame sexism on everything, and, you know, it turns out, oh, you actually want women to be better than men and in a better position than men. And then when that finally happens to this new generation coming through, which is why I think it's mainly youth that are incels, all of a sudden that's causing problems. It's just like, oh, it's because of the lack of youth-based services. Well, I never used a youth-based service that was government-funded. What is your point? But what really annoys me is that it's just, oh, it's actually the minority that are actually people we need to worry about. But most of them, oh, they all need to be in jail because of the things they say. You know, they really hate women. It's just like, no, you went out to find the worst circles you could. Many incel circles are perfectly adequate and do have issues and therefore turn into men's rights activists or just try and, you know, join society in any way they can without wanting a relationship or being able to get one. And as I say, every group that she has talked about so far, assuming they're 100% serious and not trying to be super edgy boys, sure, they are a problem. What's your proposed solution? Oh, government-funded youth-based services. Yeah, that's going to help them. Jake Davison was on a bloody apprenticeship and went to a gym every day. The man was doing his best to join society, he just wasn't doing good when it came to women. Now, what could the reason for that be? Is it this focus on being promiscuous when they're younger? Is it this focus on basically trying to turn men into women and women into men? Is it this thing of trying to reverse the gender roles somehow? Men are constantly told, oh, let your feelings out, cry, you know, try and be a woman, things like that, talk through it. No, a lot of men just prefer to go to a gym and punch a bag to let out their frustration. They need physical exercise, and they don't necessarily want to talk about what is hurting them emotionally. Whereas women do, and women will do that anyway, but at the same time, they'll be encouraged to go into careers, not focus on having a relationship, and basically have to do their best to outcompete men, because go get 'em, sister. And I just think this push in society isn't going in a good direction. Now, obviously, women can have careers if they really want to, and if men want to talk about their feelings, they obviously can. This isn't me saying we have to have fully enforced gender roles, but what we do need to enforce definitely is monogamy, and I think ideally we need to, if we are going to push gender roles on people, do have it as the classic gender roles. But ideally, I wouldn't have gender roles pushed on anyone, but I think that's an impossibility. So push gender roles as little as possible, because when that happens, you'll find that the gender roles come out as they were anyway. Anyway, sorry, I've gone on a tangent there. But this would be true of any extremist group. This is an ideology dedicated expressly to incitement of violence and hatred against women. We should treat it as if we would any other extremist group advocating for offline violence. Indicating that there is something called online violence? Sure. He was in the same boat as most of us here. One incel wrote about Davison. Another gushed about the potential huge mass murder attack. A third wrote, they can't do anything to stop the onslaught that is coming. I really want to know what forum she was on. Like, where do you find these people? Like, as I say, I know incels. I've frequented some incel forums before, albeit not for very long, as a lurker, just to see what they're doing. But I didn't see anything this bad. I didn't see them praising Elliot Rodgers unironically as the supreme gentleman who did the right thing. I didn't see any of them saying that. I didn't see any of them bringing him up either. But then it annoys me with the last line here. To tackle this threat, we need to take male violence seriously, and we should start by describing it as the extremism it is. I mean, a couple of issues there. Firstly, apparently now, all male violence against women is due to this incel community. And not only that, apparently all male violence against women is politically motivated. Both of these obviously aren't true. Men will attack women for a myriad of potential reasons, none of which are nice to think about. But to think, one, that it's politically motivated all the time, that's ridiculous. Two, to think hating women is always politically motivated, that is also ridiculous. I don't consider the incel community as political unless they're actually men's rights activists. In what way was Jake Davison in any way performing a political terrorist attack? We don't have any evidence to say that other than, oh, it turns out he's an incel. It's just, this is your mind when you think everything is political and you think any attack on a woman is an attack against all women. No, that isn't necessarily the case, and I can only think that's the case from your feminism. I don't think you'd even think this if all incels said it, which they don't. But anyway, that's enough of that one. This news got so big, it was even on morning TV in the UK. So we're going to go through a couple of clips of that and see how the certified Wahmen journalists have a take on incels, because clearly they don't know anything about it. So in this clip, we will listen to Florence Keane, who is a senior research fellow in the subject of terrorism and political violence. So obviously this is a special area. But she's asked specifically what about incels kind of draws them into becoming extremists and whether they should be classed as terrorism when such attacks occur.
In short terms, the incel movement really describes individuals who want sex from women but are unable to have it. And in some instances, we know that that's turned into a real kind of rage in real world spaces, but also online, this kind of deeply misogynistic subculture. So
again, it's like cherry picking the very worst of the group and applying it to the whole of it. I just don't agree with that. I think most incels are on a scale of dissatisfied with society and, well, you could say women, to resentful of them, but not to a point where they'd commit any extremism. They're just unhappy, lonely men. And if you've got frustrated, lonely men, they're obviously going to want to vent. Most of them don't do this violently, and especially don't do it to inflict harm on others.
Of course, the police are still saying at the moment that it's treated as a domestic incident, but we know there are actually grounds for referencing the incel subculture in previous terrorist charges.
Yes, but if you have a domestic incident, and he was quite literally targeting random people around his house after he went outside, I mean, people hear gunshots. So he probably just went mad with power or something. We don't really know his intention behind the attack. It wasn't anything like the New Zealand shooting, where the guy went on 4chan explaining his plan was to kill Muslims. There's nothing like that here. Again, his YouTube channel was just him being sad, lonely, and wanting to vent his frustration. And maybe, well, and in fact, no, not even maybe, he did apply it to the wrong targets there. But I think if you are angry and lonely and want to let the world know that, I don't think you shoot 3-year-old girls. And if we are going to classify it, then we probably will have to classify the Columbine shooting as a political incident as well. And at that point, we just need to classify absolutely every attack ever as political and terrorism. Which I wouldn't be surprised if that's what feminists want. Every attack on a woman is considered terrorism. Because it brings more charges against the men, as if the assault charges aren't enough. Look, people already get punished for breaking the law and infringing on other people's natural rights. What is the use in putting more on them, especially for something that wasn't even terror-related?
Both in the UK, and we also see this in North America as well. So really getting to the roots of kind of how this extreme misogyny works online is really crucial. And of course, each case needs to be treated individually.
Yeah, I would agree. Do it by a case-by-case basis. If it's someone like Elliot Rodgers who's out there saying, look, women won't have sex with me and it's their fault, therefore I'm going to shoot some of them, then at least we have a motivation. But can you say it's political? I don't think so. What is his political goal there? He doesn't have one. The man just wanted to get laid.
Certainly, we would say there's really a debate to be had as to whether or not we can look at what happened on Thursday, learn more details, and really establish if we can see an ideological purpose which would then meet the grounds for terrorism.
I personally think it's a complete waste of time to try and describe it as terrorism and have a debate about whether it should be called terrorism. No, it shouldn't is the answer to that, but I think it would be a lot more efficient to look into the case of Jake Davison and find out exactly what made him want to shoot people. And if it turns out he was groomed by these online incel circles, fine, fair enough. let's do something about it then. Though I think something should be done about it anyway, given the things stated by the other woman. I mean, investigate it, see if they're serious about it, see if there's any threat. Fair enough to that, because they are pretty horrific things and are probably borderline threatening. But on the other hand, I don't get why incidents like that were never reported to the police by the Bates woman. Because some things sent over there probably do come under malicious communications. And there was no word in her article about her trying to actually get the police to look into this type of thing. She seems to just want to get research for a book instead of actually trying to help. But as I say, I am not against looking into incidents like this and getting to the bottom of them. I just think when you're trying to go in with a lens of should we call this terrorism or not, you are just simply wasting time. You can't even come up with what his political ends were here. And even if he was a terrorist, he did a really bad job, because literally no one knows what he actually wanted from this, if it was terror related. So then the presenters bring up Elliot Rodger and other quote-unquote copycat incidents, which I don't know if they were necessarily inspired by Elliot Rodgers. I mean, they don't bring up any specific incidents, for instance. And all we really do know is that the Elliot Rodgers one specifically, yeah, he said he was going to go out and kill his classmates because he couldn't have sex with women. He literally says that in his videos. So we can actually see the motivation behind the killings. And I don't agree that that is political, so it shouldn't be terroristic. And I don't think it's ideological either. If it's ideological to be angry that you can't have sex with women, you are basically condemning every straight man to having terroristic thoughts, and I think that's ridiculous. But anyway, this keen woman is asked what she thinks about these ideologies and whether they are necessarily radicalising.
I mean, if you spend any time in these online communities, you will see a lot of glorification of violence when an attack happens that may be connected to the incel movement. We see some individuals praising it. It's not unanimous. There will be debates. Some actually don't condone violence. So
yeah, this is the issue with online forums. A lot of people on online forums will try and be the edgiest boys ever. And so they will praise an attack ironically because it's obviously a bad thing. The only reason that joke's funny is because these attacks are horrific. And then obviously people take it seriously, jokes like that, and then, you know, they'll debate. And the people will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing because they've caught a successful, you know, bait with the troll. So this is what I mean. You can't just look at these forums, go, people are praising it, because they unironically might all just be trolls. Hence, investigations into such things are worthwhile, because really, I don't want any more people dying for any reason. And stopping murders is a really good place to start, but I don't buy this whole feminist message that all these incels hate women and wish harm upon them. I don't buy that because I know incels.
It's important to kind of distinguish between the kind of movement and the kind of individual sectors within that, but certainly it is concerning to see people actually glorifying the violence in quite dark terms.
Yeah, if you're on an incel forum, don't even try and justify the violence, even as a troll. You're going to get your whole communities taken down, and anyone who actually wants to make good societal change is going to be grouped in with you. This is why the term incel is used as an insult everywhere by the left at the moment. It's because of things like this.
Whether or not, you know, Davison was an incel himself, we know he very much belonged to some of these online communities, and the discourse that he was using was, you know, deeply misogynistic and potentially concerning. So definitely still questions to be asked. I
mean, yeah, I leave it up to the police to investigate this case, and if it does turn out that he was radicalised and wanted to commit murder motivated by his incel community, fair enough. But my whole issue so far has been that we've jumped to that conclusion. We don't know what the conclusion is. As I said, it seems to be a domestic incident that got way out of hand. And it's probably going to be the third time I've done this, but he was a piece of shit. It was the worst thing you can do. As I do for all violence, and I'd never get involved in violence unless I was forced to for self-defence. But just because the man had some unsavoury views on women and society doesn't mean he killed people because of his unsavoury views. And really, pinning down exactly what the incel ideology is, no one's really done it. They just keep saying it's misogyny. But that's become such a vague term these days. Again, it's really hard to pin down, so they're going to have to do a lot of legwork to make sure incel become a terrorist group. Jesus Christ. Anyway, at this point, they just seem to ask the same questions to each of the three panellists, and it's not really worth going through. So just to wrap up all my convoluted thoughts throughout this, Jake Davison was a piece of shit. He was a complete piece of shit for ending the lives of at least 3 people, and 2 of which are still in critical condition at a hospital. He had unsavoury views, but not ones I think he couldn't have been talked out of if he found the right people to follow and talk about them with. I think it's a waste of time trying to denote incels as some sort of terrorist or even an ideology, as the ideas behind their ideology are not really clear to most people. As we go through, it seems to just be the main common point with the incels is that they hate women, and that isn't even true, since some of them actually seem to hate society a lot more or resent it, or at the very least are dissatisfied with it. And it's quite pointless trying to say, oh well, we can call them extremist incels then, because you can call any sort of group an extremist. You can probably have extremist furries for God's sake, but I wouldn't call them an ideology. However, that doesn't mean that I don't think that genuine cases where there is a risk of a violent incident happening in these groups shouldn't be investigated. If it does turn out that there are people in these forums who are genuinely wanting and planning to cause some sort of violent attack, then yes, fair enough to investigate it. But these attacks are incredibly rare, and as we saw from the article, they were trying to conflate these attacks with any sort of violence against women, which is obviously wrong as well, but if you do that you can start inflating the statistics, as feminists already obviously do anyway. However, that is everything I had for you today, so as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.